You know what's interesting? Pull out your phone right now and scroll through your feed. Someone's at a rooftop restaurant. Someone just got engaged. Someone's showing off their new car. Someone's crying about their Monday. And then there are people you know in real life, smart, interesting, living full lives, and their Instagram has maybe 3 posts from 2019. And you wonder, what's wrong with them? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And today, I want to talk about exactly that. Because we live in a world where sharing has become the default. Where if you didn't post it, people ask, did it even happen? Where silence online somehow gets interpreted as sadness, failure, or hiding something. But what if some people are just choosing differently? What if not posting is actually one of the most psychologically advanced decisions a person can make? Let me start with something that most people don't think about. There's a concept in psychology called the audience effect. It basically says that when you know people are watching you, your behavior changes. You perform. And here's the thing. That performance doesn't start after you post. It starts before. The moment you think, this would make a great story, while you're living something, you've already left the moment. You're no longer experiencing your life. You're producing it. And some people notice this about themselves. Not because someone told them to. Not because they read a self-help book. But because they felt it. That strange emptiness after a really good evening where they spent the whole time getting the right lighting for a photo instead of actually tasting the food. Or that hollow feeling when the birthday dinner looked perfect on camera but felt weirdly distant in real life. These people made a choice. A quiet, personal, almost invisible choice to stop curating and start living. But it goes deeper than just being present. Think about what social media actually asks of you every single time you post. It asks you to take something private, a feeling, a moment, a relationship, and offer it up for public judgment. And judgment is exactly what happens. Not always cruel judgment. Sometimes it's just a number. 47 likes, 200 likes. And before you know it, you're measuring the value of your own life in units of approval from people you went to high school with and haven't spoken to in years. The people who step back from this aren't antisocial. They're not depressed. Many of them are actually the opposite. They've built such a strong internal sense of self that they genuinely don't need that external validation loop. Psychologists call this having an internal locus of control. You decide what's good. You decide what matters. You don't outsource that job to an algorithm. And honestly, that's rare. That takes work. Because we're wired for social approval. It's biological. It's ancient. The dopamine hit from a notification is real. The anxiety of posting something and watching it get ignored is real. These aren't weaknesses, they're human. But some people looked at that cycle and decided the cost was too high. Then there's something else nobody talks about openly. Privacy as a form of protection. Not just from strangers or creeps online, although that's real too, but protection from something more subtle. When you post your relationship, you invite the world into it. When you post your achievements, you sometimes invite resentment from people you love. When you post your grief, you get responses that feel performative and hollow. And when you post your child's face, you make a choice for someone who cannot consent. Some people have simply been burned. They shared something vulnerable, and it was screenshot. They celebrated something publicly, and a friendship quietly soured. They posted something honest, and it was used against them in a conversation they weren't even part of. And they learned, not cynically, but clearly, that not every part of your life needs an audience. There's also a fascinating psychological principle called social comparison theory, and social media is basically a machine designed to make it work against you. Every scroll is a highlight reel of other people's best moments, and your brain, automatically, unconsciously, measures your ordinary Tuesday against someone else's extraordinary weekend. The people who opt out of posting often opt out of this comparison trap entirely, not because they're insecure, but because they're secure enough to know that comparison is a game with no winner. And here's something I find genuinely beautiful about this. For some people, keeping things private is how they keep things sacred. The relationship that doesn't get posted about, the prayer that never becomes a caption, the grief that stays between close friends, the joy that exists fully only in the moment it happened, not diluted by likes and comments and share buttons. There's an intimacy to unexperienced things, a fullness that evaporates the second you try to package it for consumption. Think about the most meaningful moments of your life. Were they the ones you photographed perfectly? Or were they the ones where your phone stayed in your pocket because you were too present to think about anything else? Now, I want to be fair here. This isn't a criticism of people who do post. Social media can be beautiful. It connects people. It builds communities. It helps people feel less alone. It gives artists and writers and creators platforms they could never have had before. Some people share genuinely, vulnerably, and it makes the internet a better place. This isn't about them being wrong, but the default assumption that everyone should want to share, that silence is suspicious, that a life unlived online is somehow lesser, that assumption deserves to be challenged. Because there's a growing group of people across every age, every culture, every background who are making a conscious decision to keep their lives mostly offline. And when you actually talk to them, there's a pattern. They tend to describe their relationships as deeper, their sense of self as more stable, their attention as less fragmented. They're not living in reaction to what got the most engagement. They're living by what actually matters to them. There's a philosopher named Byung-Chul Han who wrote that we've become achievement subjects in a transparency society where everything must be visible, shareable, optimized. And he argues that what gets lost in that world is interiority, the inner life, the quiet, unperformable self that exists when no one is watching. The people who protect that, they're not falling behind. They're preserving something increasingly rare. And here's the thing about human psychology. We tend to fear what we can't read. When someone isn't posting, we fill in the blanks. We assume something must be wrong. But the truth is, the most comfortable people you'll ever meet are often the ones you know the least about online. Because their confidence doesn't need a platform. Their happiness doesn't need proof. Their life doesn't need your validation to feel real. The quiet ones aren't hiding. They're just not performing. So the next time you notice someone who barely posts, someone whose Instagram is a ghost town, someone who never shares their food, or their wins, or their heartbreaks online, before you assume something is off about them, consider this. Maybe they figured something out that most of us are still trying to learn. Maybe they looked at the attention economy and decided they weren't interested in the currency it trades in. Maybe they're fully, completely, unapologetically living, and they just don't feel the need to prove it to anyone. And maybe, just maybe, there's a version of your own life that exists beyond the frame, beyond the caption, beyond the notification bell. A version that doesn't need to be seen to be real. A version that's richer precisely because it's yours and only yours. That's not loneliness. That's not fear. That's not some sad rejection of the world. That's freedom.